So in this video, I'm going to talk about, in this windy day here in Leicester, about lining a pond. So obviously a massively interesting subject about what we do to use to line the pond, swim. And basically what I'm talking about is I'm really talking about swimming ponds, which is obviously what we're known for, what we do a lot of, and lakes, what we're also known for. Now, the most common material used, particularly for lakes, is clay. So there's kind of three ways you can line a pond: clay, pond line it, or concrete and then fiberglass. They're the three most common ways. So let me talk about each of them. So let me start with clay. So behind us here, we've got this is the canal runs through Leicester, and it's clay line, and you can see, if you look at the water quality, you can see the clarity of it. It's kind of like a hazy grey, and that's basically from clay. So clay is commonly used and is always seen as the natural way of building the pond. However, we never build any pond projects with clay, and there's a few reasons why we don't. Clay is notoriously very difficult to get to seal. Okay, it's very difficult. So because it's so difficult to get to seal, it can be a bit hit and miss. So that's one big reason. The second big reason is you can never get the water clear. It's not possible, because clay comes up into the water column and it makes the water cloudy. So if you disturb it or anything disturbs it, it's going to cloud the water. So you can't get proper crystal clear water with clay. That's a huge reason why we don't use clay. You can still put a filter on a clay system, but unfortunately the clay will also block up the filter system and block up the pumps. Again, not a great solution. So the other trouble with clay is as well, is it can have slow releasing phosphates stored in it. And because of that, you're always going to have that phosphate problem. So I really don't recommend using clay in any type of project, particularly in ponds or fishing lakes. But it is the most common. And one of the reasons also not to do it is, take trees around us here, these leaves fall into it, they fall into there, and what happens is you get silt build-up, anaerobic bacteria, and over time, what happens is this keeps building up, and then the water starts to disappear. Quite common. The problem with doing that is to actually clear a clay pond out properly, you have to then completely empty it, take all that silt out, and unfortunately what happens is you take some clay out with it, again affecting whether it can seal or not. So personally, we don't use clay, and I don't recommend it for a swimming pond, particularly a swimming pond, and not even for lakes. So the other way of doing it is concrete and fiberglass. Well, obviously using a massive amount of concrete isn't great for the environment, but the problem with fiberglassing, it does look great, but all you need is a tree just to crack it. It cracks the concrete, and I've seen this happen a million times. And once you've got a crack in fiberglass, even repairing it is not going to solve the problem, because it's just going to crack again, especially if roots done it. So we never recommend fiberglassing either. So we do use pond liner, and that's how we line all our projects. So pond liner has a lot of advantages. One of them is it's flexible. So we use rubber pond liner. Because of that, it moves. So it moves with things like roots. So if roots come into it, it'll move. Generally, they all come with a lifetime guarantee, and we can join and change the shape of liner. So because of this, it's so versatile. The other thing about it is, whenever you empty out or clean a linered pond, you can get right back to the liner. So you can take the silt out completely. So in all our projects, swimming ponds or lakes, we always use a pond liner. That way we can then work on the water quality and come up with a long-term solution. So like I always say in our videos, everything we do as a company is about long-term, and clay is not a long-term solution to ponds. So some people might say, well, what about these huge lakes out there that are done with clay? Well, the reality is, if it's massive, and we're talking huge like we've got here, the reality of the silt build-up is going to happen over centuries possibly. But what we talk about with most people's gardens is you're going to have a smaller version of it in your garden. Because it's a smaller version, That's why clay generally doesn't work very well, and that's why liner is a better option. We can filter the water, or we can treat it in other ways as well. So when we do big fishing lakes, we don't generally filter the water, but there's lots of ways that we can introduce oxygen, lots of ways we can introduce nitrogen cycle zones, and this way, and also ways of reducing phosphates, and this way we can actually control the environment, and it's a controlled environment. And the one last thing I would say about a clay pond. In a clay pond, there's no real way of stopping water, land water, getting into the clay pond. So what you get a lot of, particularly in areas, like a lot of our clients have got big acreage of gardens, you get farmer fields, and then from the feed and the phosphates and the nitrates gets into the ponds very easy. What we can do with a linered pond is we're able to do a couple of things. One of them is we edge the linered pond to stop water getting in over the top of the pond. And the other thing we do is we fit hydrostatic pressure relief in, so that any water that gets near it, that goes underneath the liner, then is removed. This way we can stop water actually naturally getting into it. Again, another huge advantage to doing linered ponds. And that's why as a company we do that, because with a linered pond, you've got a lifetime guarantee, it's built to last, and everything we want to do as a company is about building something that lasts.